Colleagues, it is quite an honor for me to introduce Professor Malak Zaalouk. Because we do not have time, this is a very short summary that I will share with you. Otherwise, it will take much longer to introduce her because of all the great things that she has done. Well, Professor Zaalouk, Dr. Zaalouk is a professor of practice and the director of the Middle East Institute of Higher Education at the American University in Cairo. Dr. Zaalouk has previously served at UNICEF Regional Senior Education Advisor for the Middle East and North Africa, MENA. Her position entailed participation and advising on national reform strategies and the establishment of regional frameworks for quality education and teacher professional development. She led a regional initiative for a comprehensive framework for teacher development. Prior to that, she founded the Egyptian community schools and has promoted girls' education and quality education reform, and has been a noted global leader on issues of human rights and gender equity. She has also been involved globally in issues of early childhood development, ECD, and has participated in the MENA region and beyond in education in times of emergencies. Dr. Zaalouk sat on numerous international boards, most important of which are the UNESCO Institute of Lifelong Learning, where she was the chair of the governing board. She previously sat on the Global Monitoring Report Board, the International Institute for Educational Planning, and a number of publication boards. She is also a member of the Presidential National Council for Education. Currently, Dr. Zaalouk is part of a group of experts supporting, we have referred to it several times in our discussion. So she's a part of the experts supporting the UNESCO latest commission on the futures of education that our keynote speaker, Professor De Novoa, referred to yesterday, day before yesterday. Dr. Zaalouk has published widely on issues of development in both English and Arabic. She currently leads a number of international development projects involving teachers. She holds a diploma in educational planning from the International Institute for Educational Planning, IIEP in Paris, a PhD in social anthropology from the University of Hull, an MA in sociology from the American University in Cairo, and a BA in political science from the American University in Cairo. Her research interests include political economy of reform and social change, teacher professional development, gender, education and development, empowerment, participation and development, liberation education, comparative education, quality education, community participation and education, transitions from school to life. So I just want to show you, I particularly like this, this book. Here is the cover of one of her books, The Pedagogy of Empowerment. community schools as a social movement in Egypt. So it is my really great honor to introduce Professor Malak Zaalouk for her address, as we are going to close very soon this meeting. So her reflection will carry us through the remaining time. So Professor Zaalouk, with these few words, I would like to invite you to address our community that is waiting eagerly to hear from you.
Thank you, dear Professor Ndri, whom I cannot thank enough for her wonderful introduction, her sisterhood, her support, and being an inspiration over all the African continent and beyond. I'm really honored to be part of this event, which really to me is happening through magic, to have all these partners in these very dire and difficult times, and to really insist on holding the third symposium for the World Comparative Council of Education Society, and I'm really very proud to be part of that. Today or this evening, I would like to talk to you a little about teachers as leaders and liberators is the title of the talk I want to share with you. And I want to start off by saying that teacher leadership as a term, as a concept, is a term that is very seldom used or honored in the neoliberal environment of educational reform and development that defines the world of today. In fact, in the last couple of decades, teachers have increasingly been losing their autonomy as they are relegated to the status of technical workers under a very heavy hierarchy. They are placed in classrooms to implement the policies that have been decided for them, largely by policymakers outside the realm of education and development. They are silenced and asked to carry out probably one of the most complex tasks of all times, with little support, recognition, or respect. Teachers are regarded as low-skilled workers in most parts of the world, unfortunately. So what does this term actually signify, teacher leadership? And where and how is it applicable? So teacher leadership is a term that designates the process of discovering those teachers who are capable of transforming self. Transformation is key to that concept. Transforming self, others, transforming organizations, institutions, transforming communities and whole societies. So let us unpackage that a little. So if we look at transforming self, we are suggesting that this happens when teachers take responsibility for their own professional development through study, very importantly through research, and by joining communities of learners. That is becoming what Sean calls a true reflective practitioner. When we look at the next layer of essentially transforming others, we are really thinking of teachers empowering students in their classrooms to take responsibility for their own learning through inquiry, active learning, collaboration, skill-based learning, project-based learning. It ultimately means encouraging students to become self-reliant, independent, lifelong learners, and most importantly, global citizens. It also means equipping children with morals and values. When it comes to transforming institutions and organizations, it really means leading school improvement reform, school-based reform, and bringing about organizational change by participating in school-wide decisions for a collaborative and empowering culture. So transforming their learning to others and motivating teams to reach a larger vision of improvement towards the common good. It means actually using research, and again, I underline research, and evidence in a collaborative fashion to transform their environment into a safe and welcoming one. Such teacher leaders act as peer mentors for others in the school. They often reach boundaries far beyond their own schools when they affect whole districts. Charlotte Danielson, a great practitioner in a delightful book on teacher leadership, traces and describes the work of such teachers who, despite not having a formal leadership role, manage to impact change and transformation far beyond the fences of their own schools. These leaders are motivated, committed, and very capable of mobilizing others. I have personally had the privilege, quite honestly, to meet such teachers, both in hard to reach areas as well as government mainstream schools in almost every single region I managed to work with. I have personally observed closely such teachers in the most deprived schools of Egypt and the Arab region at large. I have also met them in Africa, Latin America, and in Asia. I have seen those teacher leaders who have made a dent and have found their way. On the community and societal levels, I have observed teachers go the extra mile to support the parents and communities around the school through parenting education, literacy classes, social and gender awareness, and in more recent times, health and hygiene awareness with our recent COVID pandemic. Teachers have indeed historically been engaged in nation building, whether individually or en masse. History is replete with such examples where teachers were in the forefront of fighting for national liberation, particularly with the challenge of preserving mother tongue and identity. During the Ottoman rule, Syrian teachers struggled to preserve Arabic and to foster a Syrian cultural identity. During other colonial encounters in our region, whether French or British, we found teachers again at the forefront of the national struggle. Steve Tamari writes a very interesting article on that matter during 18th century Damascus, but then Nadia Sbeiti recounts how Lebanon in the 20th century became a battlefield for the preservation of an Arab identity under French colonial rule. The main protagonists of the story were teachers in a school called Al Ahliya, which is a very important traditional school in Lebanon, and Al Maqasid schools. Meanwhile, we of course all are in absolute awe in front of the biggest guru of liberation, Paulo Freire, who outlines the role of teachers in leading movements of conscientization where they not only liberate the oppressed, but the oppressor as well. Through dialogue, humility, and love, teachers are able to lead their students to a situation of lucidity and clear understanding of their surrounding and their condition. Through a problem-posing pedagogy, they are empowered to move into praxis and transform their state of mind and being. Again, historically, we can only think of Dubois, a man of sharp intellect, great devotion, and commitment, is an educator who has made a long-lasting impact on the status of Black universities and education of Black people in the US and beyond. Finally, Maxine Greene, one of my very favorite educators, writing about teaching as an act of wide awakeness. An act of wide awakeness describes the role of teachers as that of being moral agents. They are moral agents of change. Teachers empower their students to make free and moral decisions, oftentimes between two importantly and moral decisions. She believes that teachers in search for their own freedom may be the only kind of teachers who can arouse young persons to go in search of their own freedom. So there needs to be an awakeness and liberation of the teachers themselves. Finally, in order for us to be free to invent our own futures, become liberated, wide awake, moral human beings, teachers need to be in the leadership position they deserve. Let us make this happen. Let us make our teacher preparation programs an apprenticeship for moral awakeness, knowledge creation and research, intellectual strength, and above all, leadership. We cannot reach the freedom we desire unless we close the gap between theory and practice, reflection and action, education and liberation. To end my reflections, here is a small Covert postscript that I would like to share with you as well. Strangely and paradoxically, the pandemic may be propelling teachers into more of a leadership position at the moment because of the need and opportunities for collaboration, technology and connectivity, and also a sudden thrust towards decentralization. A thrust towards decentralization simply because a lot of the systems are not able to cope with the crisis. Parent and community teacher communication is growing larger and larger. The centralized system in most situations can no longer lead the crisis management on their own. So they are relegating it at the school level. And teachers are slowly, maybe, going back to their leadership position. There is a kind of liberation and a semblance of autonomy that is resurfacing. However, teacher education and preparation need to harness and capitalize on this moment. Thank you so much. You're muted, Indri.
I didn't want to disturb. So yes, Professor Zaluk decided to make her talk short to give enough time for interaction, because that's what one of the aspects in her own professional life. Instead of being, just telling us things, she would like to engage. So we have time for some discussion of the key issues on the topic, the role of the teacher, and of the different dimensions of the teacher. Is that leadership? What does it entail? Leadership. Leadership as the teacher communicates knowledge, ways of being, ways of thinking in the classroom, that leadership role to the audience of the classroom, or leadership role in the community. How does the teacher position him, her, or themselves in the community? So these are so many ways in which the notion of the teacher as a leader can be interpreted and understood and analyzed. And she has, as she alluded to, she has a vast experience on the ground in different national, international contexts, local communities. So she's ready to answer questions depending on what is of interest to you. If you want her to do some comparison in terms of the different communities within the same country, different national contexts. So there are so many ways in which she can enrich our understanding of the role of the teacher as a leader. So the floor is open. We have time for almost what, 20 minutes or so. So
I'm
yeah.
also very happy to share in more detail any of the initiatives that I have had the honor to be part of and expand more.
Can you share, maybe give us a sample?
Just recently, I think, and here's where it's so important that we do have a role in bringing back teacher leadership through the kinds of partnerships that are welded between universities and teachers and schools. The kind of respect that we owe teachers is to allow them into our academic world, is to allow them to be true partners in our research initiatives, is to allow teachers to be leaders in terms of knowledge creation themselves. We have for too long objectified teachers. We've told them what they need to do. We've researched them. We've imposed. We have not worked with teachers. And so I think this is a large call also for academia to open up to the kind of true, genuine, respectful partnership that we owe teachers.
Okay, questions for Professor Zaalouk? Let me go here. Are there any hands? Yes, Musumi, I saw you. Okay, go ahead.
Good to meet you on Zoom,
Yeah.
Andrea, after a long time. And thank you so much, Professor Zaalouk, for your talk. As I was listening to you, coming from India and my own work, engaging with one of the Indian thinkers on education and what he had to say about the way teachers, the role of teachers was getting mechanized within the colonial context in India. Listening to you, I was very much remembering those lines from Tagore and his critique of the mechanization of the role of teacher and the need for the teacher to be this the kind of inspired leader that you're talking about within the community. So I wanted to know from you about some thinkers. Of course, your own writing is there, but also maybe from a few more scholars from your part of the world, from Egypt, that we could refer to with regards to their thinking about the role of the teacher. So if you can just share, then I would personally like to know more about them. Thank you.
Definitely. I'll be very happy to do that. But let me just mention Taha Hussein is a classic that is a very important foundational read on the role of teaching and the enhancement of indigenous cultures. So I think that's one. But generally speaking, there are growing concerns with particularly engaging teachers in activities such as action research. So this is slowly growing as a culture. It's a very significant culture in some of our universities to engage school teachers in partnerships in research. Also to have wide-ranging partnerships with school teachers. There is a strong movement for revamping currently at home in Egypt, teacher preparation programs. And again, surfacing very strongly is the whole notion of moral and values. Subject matter has for so long occupied a huge component of teacher preparation. It is important, but I think the attributes of leadership are significantly more important in this dehumanized world we live in today or are going towards. And really, some of the biggest hope lies in teachers being able to engage young students with concepts such as global citizenship, sustainable development, engaging young students with the idea of self-reliance and various other concepts that are so important, and collaboration, cooperation, empathy, etc., etc. But we need to give them space. We need to be their allies. We need to open doors. And we need to ensure that the kind of preparation and apprenticeship they gain is not mechanical, is not, simply ensuring that they can use the technology and simply ensuring that they know their subject matter well.
Thank you.
Okay,
Thank
thank
you so
you.
much.
I see a hand. Gertrude? Gertrude Schutt?
Yes. Let me ask to forgive my passion, because anything that says teaching, I'm very, very passionate about teaching. And all that teaching entails. And as I heard Professor Zaluk presenting, I couldn't help reflecting on my own geographical location, not London, Caribbean, how we grew up and what the teacher is perceived to be. And the teacher has always been seen as a leader. And because of the regional, there's a term that was coined by the late Professor Rex Nettleford. We call it regionalism.
Yeah.
Of how we do things, how we call for action in the Caribbean region. And we had a teachers sort of summit once, and I decided to write a poem about the teacher. And the name of the poem is The Reflective Leader. And as I heard Professor delivering, I'm saying, I can see what you're saying encapsulated in that poem, because it looks at teacher at different levels.
Well, maybe you want to share your poem.
Yeah. Are we still in communication, or
What's more is how the teacher is seen as a person who would, back in the Caribbean, we have the A's, the B's, and the C's, and beyond that. And for me, you're not a teacher if you cannot engage with those at the bottom of the grading scale, as well as you can engage with those at the upper level of the grading scale. So that poem encapsulated all of that. And as I hear you speaking, Professor, I couldn't help but reflecting on that poem, because it just says, and maybe that's why I'm a poet, because it says everything that people want to say in a little few words. So that delivery was encaptured. I would, at the end, if you don't mind, I can share that poem with you. If this time, I can share it with you.
I would love.
With us, everybody, right?
Yeah.
When you say you, meaning all of us.
Yes.
Okay. And should I read it now?
Yes, please.
Please.
Okay, just give me a minute. Okay. Can you still hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. The title of the poem is The Reflective Leader. I am the loving mother, the protective father, the caring guardian, the devoted pastor. I am the teacher. I am the ever-ready first aider, the supportive nurse, the skillful paramedic, the competent doctor. I am the teacher. I am the on-duty policeman, the resolute lawyer, the influential judge, the decisive juror. I am the teacher. I am the leader in the community, the champion of national causes, the link between the region, the exposer of global issues. I am the teacher. I am the willing learner, the compliant student, the speculative theorist, the analytical researcher. I am the teacher. Bring me the students, the sprinting A's, the middle distance B's, and the fast walking C's. Let them teach me that I am the teacher.
Wow.
That's it.
Wow.
Wow. Thank
Wow.
you.
Excellent. Thank
This
you.
is absolutely beautiful.
Yes.
Absolutely
indeed.
beautiful.
Indeed,
It's
indeed.
such,
Yeah.
and that's the kind of exchange when we're talking about teachers that one would love to see. That's the kind of image our indigenous cultures had of teachers prior to the colonial encounter. This is what teachers were about. They were comprehensive leaders in their own communities, until which time they became technical implementers, and today more and more so in this neoliberal society we live in.
Okay. More question. We have time for a few more questions, comment.
One thing I would like people to sort of, if at all, reflect with me. Do you think that this pandemic is an opportunity for regaining ground for teachers?
May I don't want to abuse my position as chair, but I want to share a little research that was done several years back when I was director of a doctoral program in Togo, West Africa, where the teachers from the colonial time, when they have that ambivalence, here are the teachers representing the oppressive system, having to teach in the language of the oppressor. But at the same time, they were able to see, as Kizerbo, the philosopher and educator, said, in the end, it doesn't matter how they teach you to read and write. Once you learn how to read and write, you will be free to read what you choose to read. So they saw that aspect and gained respect. Fast forward, 1980s, structural adjustment program. The teachers who used to be respected in the community were no longer respected because in specific countries, they were not receiving their salaries. And in areas where they grow cash crops, coffee and cocoa, there are farmers who are relatively okay, even if the price of the commodity fluctuates. So the worst thing that can happen to anyone to lose your respect is to borrow money, is to owe. So when the salary, 3 months, 4 months was not coming, they started to borrow money and started to lose the respect. And it contributed to decline in enrollment because the teacher who was the model of success in the community was showing that, in fact, his or her position didn't carry much weight in the capitalist system, where the value of the position is measured by how much money and how regularly the money comes in. So how do we, to go back to your question, in such communities, the challenges of the COVID-19, when the teachers have to be at the forefront of many other new roles, can they regain their respect back? These are some of the questions. I don't know the experiences in the other areas that you work in, if you had such fluctuation of the image of the teacher, self-image and image from the community.
Yeah, it's even worse, Professor Andre. We're talking about teachers who become on the labor market for moonlighting, for actually private tutoring, and not just only borrowing or so totally losing status because of the proletarization of teachers, the extent of which teachers become part of a labor market where they need to do extra hours and be employed by students, basically. So can you imagine the impact on the relationship where it's students and their families that are actually employing teachers for private tutoring? What I have been noting with COVID-19 recently, particularly in back home in our country, there is a tendency to revere teachers more than the past few decades. For example, there has been a move suddenly in the last couple of months to increase, which had never happened before, to increase teacher salary. Also, to have globally teachers at the forefront. We're seeing more and more UNESCO meetings, global meetings, where teachers are coming back to be in the forefront of concern. And that's largely because I believe, as I said, large centralized, large systems globally, because of the pandemic, because of the nature of the sort of disappearance of face-to-face, the lack of possibility to closely monitor, to closely guide and be centrally responsible. Because of all these aspects, teachers are finding their own space again. They're suddenly finding themselves responsible for parent queries. They're responsible, for all those communities who know very little about how to, mitigate the pandemic. They're responsible for their own students in multiple roles. So there is a small, it's an observation. I don't have data to support it. I don't have research to support it as yet. The only research I have that will be coming into publication is that there is increased connectivity between teachers. And that's a force in itself. With COVID, with technology becoming more and more enhancing, and because teachers have been forced to do learning through technology and distance, they are now using this for connecting amongst themselves. And that's brilliant, to have more and more collaborative conversation amongst teachers. That in itself is an empowering process. So these are small steps and small signs one has been observing that I'm hoping can perhaps carve an opportunity for a renewed leadership for teachers.
Okay, thank you. I see another hand. Martial? Martial?
Yes. Hi, Professor Zaalouk. Nice to see you again.
Nice to see you too.
Yes. You ended with a point that, on which I wanted to comment, which to me gives a lot of hope. And that's what you've been discussing, that the pandemic is an opportunity, and it forces decentralization. Mm-hmm. And that it is a moment to seize, to reclaim teacher leadership. And to add to the anecdotal data that you've brought up, I think you see that almost everywhere. You hear parents who are asking for schools to remain open, even in places where governments want to close schools, that parents are standing up and saying that we need schools open, which to me is a sign of the recognition of the importance of schools. And if you talk about the importance of schools, you're also talking about the importance of teachers. And I think for parents who are keeping their children at home, they realize how important teachers are. Yeah. And I'm really hopeful that we are sort of at a turning point for the teaching profession. And I was also appreciative of your insistence on involving teachers in research and involving teachers in academic work, for instance, in teacher preparation. I know that some universities have been doing that, having teachers intervene in classes, but I think we can do more of that. I personally have done some of this kind of work in Burkina Faso, where for 5 years I brought together a group of 20 teachers from different schools to share their work, collect data, and the teachers were surprised. They couldn't believe that someone who is at the university would be interested in their work. So I think there is more of that to be done. At the same time, we need to recognize that teachers have their own constraints when they engage in research. So we need to be mindful of that too. But at the same time, I think there is really hope with this pandemic that teachers will reclaim the leadership role that they have always been playing without any recognition. And to finish about the decline of the status, Ndri mentioned the structural adjustment program. I think that one of the events or policies that really was harmful to teachers, particularly in sub-Saharan Africa, has to do with the contract teacher policies, whereby teachers were recruited on limited contracts to work in schools with little preparation, and being cared for by communities. And to me, that has gone on for decades and has really harmed the status of the teacher. So it's really encouraging to see that there is some recognition that is coming back for teachers. Thanks a lot for your comment, which are really inspiring to me.
Okay, thank you. So we have time for a very quick question and quick answer. Or is there any question I don't see?
Carlos has a, Carlos.
Okay, Carlos. Oh, his physical hand. Yeah.
I
Carlos.
have one. Nice to see you, Malak. But
It's lovely to see you.
The question I have is that teachers have had a different experience this time, which certify or clarify things that had happened in their life before. With the digital pedagogy, they suddenly discover that some of the students don't have any support in the families. In other terms, particularly in very, very modest environments, neighborhoods, the parents go out, they have 2 or 3 jobs, the kids are at home, the oldest kid will be in charge. And many teachers have told me that they cannot connect with the students, that the students don't do the homework, etc., etc. So I wonder if that is the case everywhere. I suppose it is. And I wonder how the teachers have learned how to deal with that once they come back to in-person education.
Yeah. You're very right, Carlos, to point out, of course, there's so many disparities, and the fact that there's a huge digital divide, and the fact that, of course, a lot of children are left out of the online formula, except that systems and countries have very quickly tried to do alternative technologies, of course. So most countries in our region, at least, according to what's happening through the groups that UNESCO supervises in the Arab region, what is happening right now is that they are diversifying technologies. And again, teachers have become extremely important in the diversified technologies. So now they're employing radio, they're employing television, they're employing all kinds of other technologies that would be a lot more accessible to those children left behind. But what's important is that teachers are again gaining a central position because of the fact that, for example, I'll give you a concrete example. The fact that there are no longer massive examination and proctoring and all of that. So slowly, the teachers are becoming mediators between what young children would be normally doing with their parental support. They are now doing with teacher support on all kinds of applications and or opportunities in communities to support young children to do alternative assessment. So rather than doing those massive tests and exams, students are being asked to do mini pieces of research, which teachers are now supporting these young children to do that. And they are more and more in communication with the families, because families, we must remember, through locking them down and keeping them home, a lot of the families were at home. They were homebound to a large extent, at least for defined periods of time, which allowed teachers to become closer also to families. That there has been an increasing communication between families and teachers that has been observed in all the meetings I've attended of teachers and other educational systems in our region, have shown that there's a lot more communication than there ever was before. Our schools were always black boxes, you know, parents were not allowed to visit, they were not allowed to communicate with teachers, and the parent-teacher associations were not functioning really. But now with COVID, there is almost a dire need and an increased communication that is re-emerging between families and teachers.
Thank you.
Okay, well, I think we have exhausted the time, unfortunately, but we have established contact for those of you who know Professor Zaalouk. You know her work without knowing her. Now you have seen her. So even if we're not sitting face to face, we have some connection. And I invite you to contact her if you have a question that you didn't have the opportunity to ask. So on our collective behalf, I would like to thank Professor Zaalouk. I know it was very tight, so I must express here our gratitude for managing to give us this moment. So thank you all very much. And we're going to continue. We have about 10-minute break, and then we will continue with the film. I hope you'll be able to stay with us